Hello everyone and welcome to this video. In this video we're going to be using or actually looking at client-side exploitation with the social engineering toolkit or the SET toolkit as it's so called. Alright, so you might be asking yourself, well, what exactly is the social engineering toolkit? Well, the social engineering toolkit is a tool that was designed to create social engineering based attack vectors. The social engineering toolkit can create custom attacks very quickly. You can create malicious payloads, you can create PowerShell attacks, and there's a lot more you can create. Now, when it comes down to actually exploiting a system, you can start up a browser locally on your host operating system. You can create malicious code and then use Metasploit to deliver the payload or the exploit. Alright, so it's really vast in terms of the types of attacks you can perform. Now, in this video, what we're going to be looking at is we're going to be looking at setting up a fake site, and essentially the attack vector we're going to be using is the credential harvesting method. Alright, so this will essentially allow us to create a fake site, send it to our target or our client, and then from that the client enters their credentials, and the credentials are sent back to us, and they realize that that was not the actual site that they think they were visiting. Alright, so for example, let me explain the process with a simple example. So let's say we use the credential harvesting method. We clone the Facebook website, the login page for Facebook, and then we host it on our local web server, and we use the credential harvesting method with the social engineering toolkit. And we essentially now send our link in which the cloned website is hosted on, and we send that link to our client, and the client clicks on it thinking that it is a valid website or a valid URL, and once they access it, they see it's the Facebook page, and they think it's the legitimate Facebook page because we have cloned the legitimate Facebook page. And essentially what happens is they enter the credentials, and their credentials are sent back to us, therefore giving us access to their Facebook account, which we can then log into and lock them out of. So again, you can see how dangerous this attack is, how much damage it can do. So I do have to pass out caution. Please do not try this without any written permission, or there are consequences to using this for for malicious intent. Alright, so in this video we're going to be performing this on our local area network, and more specifically we're going to be running this on our Windows 7 virtual machine. So this is going to act as our client or our target, and I'll show you exactly how everything works. Alright, so we're going to go back into Kali Linux, and by default the social engineering toolkit is pre-installed. So that is awesome. It is our client or our target. Okay? So it's pre-installed and it's pre-configured, so you do not need to do any setup process. All you need to do is just launch it up, similar to what we saw with Beef. Alright, so the only thing you need to do probably is just update your repositories and your packages, and you should be running the latest version. So what you can do is it's not hosted on your dock here, it is hosted in your applications menu and your exploitation tools. So it is under your applications and exploitation tools. So you'll find it there. It is the SET or the social engineering toolkit. So you can launch it from there, or you can launch it from your terminal, which is what I personally prefer. And to launch it, just hit SET toolkit. Alright, so set toolkit and just hit enter. Alright, so once you hit enter, it's probably going to ask you to read the user agreement and then hit yes to proceed. Now, since I've already ran this before, it didn't ask me that, but for you, if that was your first time running, it's going to ask you to whether or not you agree to the user permissions, to which it'll prompt you to enter yes or no. Obviously hit yes, and it should take you to this menu. So welcome to the social engineering toolkit. I'm so excited to share this with you. Alright. So as you can see, it's going to display information about the social engineering toolkit, and then you have your menu right here. So your menu is really simple. It is sorted in terms of your number sorting, allows you to select options. So option 1 is social engineering attacks. Option 2 is penetration testing. Option 3 is third-party modules. Option 4 is update the social engineering toolkit. So if you want to update it, just hit 4 on your keyboard and hit enter. Alright, so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using the social engineering attacks, because the attack vector that we're going to be using, which is the credential harvesting method, essentially belongs under social engineering attacks. So we're going to hit 1. Alright, and now what we need to select is, as you can see, there are plenty of options here that you can go through yourself. But the most important thing that we need to select here is the website attack vectors, because we're going to be using a website as an attack vector. So we're going to select option 2. Fantastic. And now it's going to give you the sub menu here, now selecting your target method. Alright, so you have your Java applet attack method, you have your Metasploit browser exploit method, which is not really powerful because I've used it before. It's really dependent on the browser and the operating system you're running. Now the awesome thing with the credential harvesting method, which as you can see is option 3, is that it works on any operating system. It works on any platform. It can work on your iOS devices, Android devices, Windows, Linux, Mac OS, etc., etc. You don't need to worry about the operating system and the program or the browser that is running. Alright, all you need to do is just socially engineer the URL or the link so that it looks realistic and the user believes that it is indeed, in this case, as we're going to be using the Facebook page, and then obviously they enter their credentials and the credentials are sent to us. So as I said, we're going to be using Facebook as an example because it is a fantastic way of understanding the real damage that this can cause. Alright, so again, let's get back to the to selecting the third option, which is the credential harvester attack method. So we're going to hit option 3, and now it's going to ask you to select the option here in terms of how you want to clone, whether or not you want to clone your website, if you're using a web template, if you're using a custom import where you can import your own web templates or your sites that you've created that you want to use for your social engineering. Okay. So what we're going to be using is the site cloner because we want to directly copy the Facebook web page so that it looks as real as possible and as authentic as possible. The only thing that's going to be different is the URL or the link, which will be the IP address of the local server in which we've hosted it. In this case, it's going to be the Kali Linux IP address, all right, because that is where we're hosting the cloned website. Okay, so we're going to hit option 2, which is site cloner. Now it's going to ask you the IP address for the postback. So in this case, it's asking you what is the IP address of the operating of the computer in which you want to receive the credentials. In this case, and by default, it will show you the IP address that you should use. It is simply your Kali Linux IP address, which in this case is 192.168.1.106. You might be saying to yourself, is that really true? Well, we can check it for ourselves. So we're going to open up a new terminal and we're going to just perform the ifconfig command. And there we are, 192.168.1.106. So we do know that it is correct. So we're going to enter that right now. All right. Now the great thing is you do not need to set your target IP address. That's because your target is going to send their credentials to your IP address. All right. So that is the basic process behind what's going on here. So I'm going to hit enter, and now it's going to ask you to enter the URL of this website that you want to clone. In this case, we're going to be using the Facebook website. So the Facebook URL is https, all right, which we can enter just right here, https www.facebook.com. And once we hit enter, it's going to start the cloning process. So as you can see, cloning the website, https login.facebook.com. And the cloning process is complete. And as you can see, the best way to use the attack is if the username and password form fields are available. Alright, so we do know that they are available because it has cloned the login page for Facebook, as you can see right here. The login.facebook.com, login.php. So yes, that is going to be the page. So the credential harvester is running on port 80. So it's done. All we need to do now is open up the IP address of the Kali Linux virtual machine on our client, or we can actually use different cloaking methods or URL changing methods, like we can use link shorteners to manipulate how the link will appear to the user, but that's for another video. That's really in terms of the social engineering and how you would make the link more appealing to the user. But in this case, we're looking at the process of exploitation. So essentially, in theory, if we go to our Windows 7 operating system here and we open up our browser, all we need to do is enter our Kali Linux IP address, and it should open up a Facebook page. All right, so 192.168.1.106. The actual Facebook login page is hosted on the Kali Linux operating system or virtual machine. So a user would click onto this, and as you can see here, it's going to take them, if we just go back, it's going to be hosted in this language. So I'm not sure what language this is, probably Kiswahili or something. So by default, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to enter my details. So this is probably your email address. So we're just going to hit something like test@gmail.com. And we're going to hit the password as, we're just going to call it test123. All right. And once we hit log in, it should take us to the original Facebook login page where the user recognizes that they haven't actually logged in. So you might be asking yourself now, well, what has happened here? Have the credentials been sent? Well, yes, they have. If we go back here, as you can see, let us just go back slightly up here, and you will see that the credentials were entered. This is because we reloaded the page. So let's just go slightly up to the top here. There we are, slightly up to the top here. And if we scroll down here, we reloaded the page here several times. So we're just going to scroll to the bottom where the results were probably given to us. As you can see here, the email, the possible username and password field were found. The email is test@gmail.com and the password is test123. Alright, so that was how to perform the credential harvesting attack method with the social engineering toolkit. More specifically, this is how to perform client-side attacks. Alright, so that is a wrap for section 5 where we looked at exploitation. Now let's look at a summary of what we learned in this section. Alright, so the first thing we did is we started learning about the Metasploit console. We looked at the Metasploit basics, some terminology that was very, very important to use, and again the syntax. We then moved on to performing a very simple exploit, and that is how we learned the Metasploit console. Alright, we then moved on to using Armitage being the graphical user interface for Metasploit. Alright, so again there we performed some basic exploitation on our Metasploitable 2 virtual machine. Alright, we then moved on to database exploitation with Metasploit. We very simply we exploited a MySQL database using the brute force attacks. We then moved on to client-side attacks where we started targeting clients. In this case, we used the BIF browser or the BIF framework to exploit browsers, and we looked at the hooking process, how to actually intercept or how to inject the script into a web page and how to send that web page to your target, and the target getting their browser hooked, and from then onwards you can then perform exploitation on the target that has their browser hooked. Okay, we then moved on to client-side attacks with the social engineering toolkit where I showed you how to generate a fake web page, or we cloned a web page, and from that we were able to perform the credential harvesting. Alright, so that is going to be it for this section. In the next section, we'll be looking at password cracking. Alright, so I'll be seeing you in the next section.